Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Fight.
Very excited today. We, on this podcast, talk about a lot of books. We talk about things that we read. We take excerpts out. And one book comes up constantly, right? And that's How to Win Friends and Influence People, written by Dale Carnegie. And today we are so lucky to have someone from the Dale Carnegie organization here to talk to us and teach us some stuff and just run us through a lot of things. So Jody Frawley, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me, Mark and Theron. This is going to be so much fun. We're going to have
so much fun. And I gave a little who you are, but I'm going to let you, for the people listening who don't know you, we have a lot of local listeners who do know you, but for the people listening who don't know you, if you could give a quick kind of bio description of what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I've lived in Central New York now. Let's say I've been married 30 years, so I've been here 34 years now, coming down from the North Country. I had a long career in marketing, radio, television, newspaper, digital marketing was the longest piece towards the end, and loved every single day of my life working with local businesses, with a specialty towards the end in recruitment advertising. So when Dale Carnegie, this opportunity to work full-time for Dale Carnegie came up a year and a half ago, in my mind, it was a perfect transition because I would get to a point where I would help recruit, quality employees for an organization, but I was always recruiting, for the same position. I think to myself, what's happening with that manager in that department?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if only I could help them at that end. So now with Dale Carnegie, I step over that line and help organizations to really get their employees engaged, happy to be working there, being the most productive that they can be, communicating well, and becoming great leaders. So I've been with Dale Carnegie a year and a half and still loving everything that I do. It's so rewarding. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Welcome. Yeah, I love the fact of that continued training. I think that's a big thing. Like if you own a franchise, that's kind of built into franchises. But the people that own small businesses, the mom and pops, one of the probably the least expensive things you can do with the most impact is staff training and development. And Dale Carnegie, and when we talked before we got on the recording, he's the OG. I mean, his stuff is amazing, and I'm sure it's very up to date. But a lot of it's just timeless, as you know. It's timeless. So if you would talk a little bit about the importance of the training and a little bit what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is really what a lot of the training is based on. And there's multiple trainings, if you will, talent development. But the foundational program that we call the Skills for Success is really pulls out five of those drivers for success, right? If we're going to be successful, we have to build some self-confidence, right? We have to learn how to have good interpersonal communication. We need to build relationships because people like to work for people they like. And when we take time to get to know somebody, that makes a huge difference as a leader. We need to be able to communicate effectively, clear, concise, inspirational, enthusiastic, what's going to motivate people, what's going to make sure that things are done right. So really crafting that communication. And when we start putting this all together, we naturally become better leaders. If I were to describe Dale Carnegie's type of leadership, it's definitely kind of a servant leadership. It's what do my people need from me? How can I make them better? How can I empower them to make better decisions? And the last piece is my favorite. It's the mindset and attitude of managing your stress. Because you think about it, when you get stressed out, what goes out the window? Your communication, your relationships, your confidence. You certainly don't show up as a leader when you're feeling that weight of, or if your mind is just not in the right spot, if you let those negative thoughts really get you down. So that's what I would say is the foundational training that we do. for the Skills for Success talent development. And like I said, there are other trainings that go further, deeper into leadership development. There's sales trainings. There's high impact presenting when a leader really wants to show up with leadership presence. But the foundational is where my heart lies, and that's where I'm a certified trainer for the Skills for Success.
What I love most about this book, and I'm gonna go into my brain here for a second, but what I love most about specifically the Win Friends and Influence People book is when you first pick it up, it's a book for nerds, right? It's a like when you first see it, like I picture sitting on a beach by yourself with no friends, thinking, how do I make friends, right? Like, yeah, I remember the first time I picked it up, I'm 15 years old. I'm like, I hope my friends don't see me reading this because like they're gonna think I don't have any friends. And then you get through it and you realize
Yeah.
it's really it's a how to have good relationships book. And I think you go through that phase where it becomes a sales training, right? It becomes a way to learn how to sell better. But then you get to kind of that third level, right? Where, because you said something that really struck me was that servant leadership. If
Mhm.
I have a sales style, I'm a servant service based
Mm-hmm.
salesperson, right? How can I help before I think about making money? But so you go from kind of that sales book to then it's a leadership book. And I really
Mhm.
think one of the cool things about this book is it takes you from that low level of like, I just wanted people like to like me a little bit,
Mhm.
right? Because some people, believe it or not, have an issue with that. Not for me.
Not
Everyone
you.
likes
Not
me.
you.
But I think some people don't pick up this book because they can't get over that first hump. And I
Mhm.
try to tell them if you get
Interesting.
over that first hump, the
Yeah.
the payoff of the training later is huge.
Interesting. Yeah, I never even thought of it that way. So thank you for sharing that.
Probably just in my head. Like I said,
Yeah.
things
Yeah,
that go on in
no.
my head are very different.
It makes sense though. How to win friends and influence people is certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have had one other person that I ran into one day at networking told me that said, you know what? It changed my life because I wasn't making friends and it taught me how to build relationships. Like again, it was somebody kind of young had been given the book and I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah."
Yeah.
Well, when you're talking, I wrote down all 5 things. I was thinking, well, Mark, here's our next 5 podcasts. We have it all laid out. We're going to expand on them. And
Yeah.
I think I'm sure we've done a lot of those in previous podcasts, but the way it's built out, 5 things, and there is so much in each one of them that you can go on for. If you don't mind talking about the mindset and attitude, because I think that's something I remember back in the 90s was huge. Attitude is everything, accessories, 80s, 90s, all of that was big. And then it kind of changed and attitude wasn't the big thing. And I kind of felt that too. And then all of a sudden now I'm back. And Mark and I talked about this a couple of years ago. We're like, attitude, might not be everything, but it's so big because, and you alluded to this,
Yeah.
it affects all the other ones. So if you don't
Oh,
mind expanding on the mindset and
absolutely.
attitude.
Absolutely. Actually, Dale Carnegie's part of his methodology is the performance change pathway. And it
Okay.
starts with the emotional change. Because as a leader, you can tell somebody how to do something, the behavior change that needs to
Mm-hmm.
happen. But until they believe they need to do it, we
Mm-hmm.
kind of go through, that emotional or mindset change, the attitude. I need to do it. I can do it. Do I want to do it? Will I do it? Right? So there's unpacking that attitude change. There's many steps within there. And the emotional or the performance pathway methodology starts with emotional change.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add in the behavioral change in order to get the performance change. We call it EC plus BC equals PC. Everything has an acronym, right? So,
Excellent. Yep.
but yeah, it's so critical. And when we're in the classroom, we start with that. Are we ready to make a change with our attitude? Do we have the right attitude coming into the training that we want to change? So we start there. Then we move into some of the knowledge, right? Here's some of the tools we're going to be going
Mm-hmm.
through. But I'll stop there and just I'll stay on what you asked me to of just
No, I love
the
that. No,
attitude change.
yeah, no, that's really, really good. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things, it's funny, Jody, because one of the reasons we started this podcast, right, was, like we don't really necessarily think that, air quote success is difficult, but there's, like there's very, clear steps that you take to be successful in any given thing. If you want to be fit, there's certain things you can do. If you want to be, a good salesperson, there's certain things you can do. If you want to be a good father, there's certain things you can do, right? But people don't do it. And I think one of the things we started with this podcast in the very, very beginning was why? Like, what is the reason, that, I mean, I have salespeople all day long, oh, I want to be better at this. I want this. I want to be successful in this. And then 6 years later, it's the same conversation,
Mhm.
so I think what you just said, really kind of cues into that because it's such a, you know, I think a lot of times people don't change until, they're at what I call the crying in the bathroom moment,
Mhm.
when they're in there looking themselves in the mirror and they've just hit it. And
Mm,
then that change happens.
yeah.
And I think one of the greatest things leaders can do is they can create that in people,
Mm,
before they get to that point, before they're, sitting there beating themselves up.
yeah.
So I think that's such a strong point that you made.
Yeah. Well, and think about it. Who do we usually want to change?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Everybody
Everybody else.
else.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, if only they did that. If
Yeah.
only they did that. Who can we change?
Yeah.
Only ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have no
If only the
control.
leads were better. If only the leads were better. If
Right.
only these
Yeah.
people weren't such tire kickers. If only,
Right. Yeah.
and really, what I talk to my team about is there's no bad leads. There's only bad salespeople, right? Who don't have that big enough picture or that long enough game. Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful to have that ability to pull it towards yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. You also brought up something that we talk about a lot about too, is they may have the desire to change. You give them the tools, they learn a whole lot, that knowledge tools, everything is there, but then they don't apply it. We call that the knowledge trap. Like how many
Hmm.
how many times have you gone to a training? You're like, wow, that was
Hmm.
so good. And you take the training, you set it on your shelf, and you never do anything about it. That's the differentiator with Dale Carnegie. We literally, day one, get them applying what they've learned
Mhm.
and holding them accountable to come back and share it.
Yeah.
So that's really, why the methodology of Dale Carnegie training works so well,
Yeah.
is you don't get stuck in that knowledge trap.
That I heard a quote yesterday. Somebody said action precedes clarity. That so many people, delay making decisions because they're kind of stuck in that fight or flight. They want it to be perfect before they apply it, right? They want
Hmm.
all the knowledge and all the, they want the plane to take off without hitting any turbulence or anything. They just want to have that smooth flight. But, in reality and leadership in life, we never get that. So if that's what you're waiting for,
Yeah.
that knowledge, you get stuck right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Have you guys ever been through trainings like that where you're like, wow, this was so great, and then you just don't apply what
Never.
you
I
learned?
always apply everything.
Like
So
you're
yeah,
learning.
and Mark knows this, but one of my mentors talked about the Tuesday by noon theory, and the whole idea was that a lot of seminars are over the weekend, and you're all jazzed up Monday morning, and even through Monday, and then Tuesday by noon, it's all
Yep.
fizzled. So the big thing he talked about is making sure you have an action plan, so you're hitting the ground running Monday morning. You do that on the drive home, the flight home, or whatever, your action plan. And when I instituted that, years ago, what a huge difference that made.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just you're hyped up and your intentions, like most people's intentions, are very good and they're going to make a change, but they never do. They never do. So
That's why the accountability piece is so
yeah, for
important. They
sure.
have to they have to come back, the next week in the physical training, or whether it's virtual or in person,
Right.
report out how it went,
Yeah.
how tried applying some principles from one through nine from Dale Carnegie's Golden Book. How did it
Yep.
go? You
Yeah.
want you said you wanted to build a stronger relationship with this person.
Yep.
Well, start by becoming a friendlier person. Get to
Right.
know them. How did it go?
Being
Yeah.
start by
And we
being
always
the
say,
person.
we
Yeah.
always say, listen, it may not go well the first time. There are no
Mhm.
guarantees. right? You can
Yeah.
only control your action. You can't control theirs. It may not go well, and that's okay. Come
Yeah.
back and report out how it went.
Well, and
Well,
I think that that tackles kind of the importance of that continued training, right?
mhm.
You don't, like in the beginning, I said I read this book once a year. Why do I read it once a year? Why don't I just apply it the first time I read it? Because there's so much stuff in it, that
Yeah,
and some stuff doesn't apply at certain times of my life, and some stuff does. So, I think application's important. Applying everything all at the same time never works. It just drowns you, and that's why it's important to take those pieces that you find are going to have the biggest impact, put
Mhm.
them into play, and then continue that lifelong learning, so that you can eventually get a lot of the pieces in place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we talk about that because, principles 1 through 9, and I don't know if you can read these. I can provide a golden book link that people could download
okay,
if you
that'd be
want.
great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They start with how to become a friendlier person. The next group goes into how to gain willing cooperation. And I always joke, you can't go to any of the 10 through 21 principles until you've established a relationship with somebody.
Right.
You can't walk up to someone and say, "Hey, nice to meet you. Want to get married?"
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Right.
It's amazing how many people do that. It's amazing. I mean, in sales, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
LinkedIn is the land of that, isn't it?
Oh
Like,
my God,
hey, thanks
LinkedIn
for
is
connecting. Do you
not
want to
cool.
schedule on my calendar and buy my AI?
Yeah.
No, thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny when I have time, and I feel like, just being that guy is I will troll the LinkedIn people that have, because I get it. And I'm sure we all get every day
Mhm.
several, sales things. And I'm like, you don't even know me. You don't even know what I do. You didn't even ask hi. So, I'll troll them sometimes and back and forth. And Mark, I know you do this way
all the
better than
time,
me.
all the time.
It's just
Yeah,
hilarious. It's
I try
fun.
to sell
It's
them a
fun to do.
house.
Yeah.
Try to sell them a
I
house. It's
immediately
all.
try to sell them office space. It's great.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Um, but and Jody, so something I want to, this is like an important thing for me to touch on because, I do a lot on social media. I love social media. A lot of people disagree with me about social media. I love social media. The word influence, right,
Mhm.
has taken on, I
Mhm.
mean, if you ask, I would say at least 50% of, kids under 18 today, what do you want to be when you grow up? They want to be a social media influencer, right?
Right.
I
Mhm.
joke around with my kids.
Yeah.
I'm a micro influencer, right? Like I have a few
Right.
people who kind of listen to me, but
Yeah.
when you watch the actions of people on social media, right, you see almost the
Hmm.
straight opposite. Even the people who have
Hmm.
influence and followers and stuff like that of what Dale Carnegie talks about and what the book's about, right?
Right.
And I work very hard at making, social media less about, hey, look at me, and more about, hey, look at these people, look at you, look at the things
Hmm.
you're doing, right?
Hmm.
So, is there, does exist yet, has that Carnegie method adapted to the social media world that we're in today? Like, is there training for that?
Training for that specifically on how to translate how to win friends and influence people
Yeah, because I
throughout
because I
social media channels.
because I think that, and like, this is me. I think
Mm,
if you read the book and you apply it, you wouldn't go on social media and be a jerk, right? Or be, that person. Like if you're doing that well. But I think,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the
mm,
book
Hmm.
that could be applied to social media to make social media like a really much better place than it is,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Just like, I mean, if people went into a chamber lunch and just yelled things, that they're selling on social, like they do on social media, like, hey, look at my thing.
Yeah.
Um, I just think the world would be different. So I'm very interested in, just how influence on social media versus influence in the real world, kind of how those two things are not matching up.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The way that we approach that is you apply this everywhere in your life. I mean, when you go through Dale Carnegie training, what you're learning can be applied everywhere and should be applied everywhere. So
Yeah.
the fact you're absolutely right that you should be showing up on social media the same way you would in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right that it's always about the other person.
Hmm.
Principle
Hmm.
17 is like the one that we always draw out of Dale Carnegie. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, it should be applied everywhere.
Yeah.
We find home lives become husbands and wives become happier people, children get the benefits because when you show up differently, thinking about somebody else and how what you say, has influence over them
Yeah.
Hmm.
or, impacts them, the power of the word,
Hmm.
is so important. Praise and sincere appreciation is another big principle, of course. Um, so you're absolutely right. We need more people understanding how to show up on social media, that it's not about them. It's always about the other person.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
I
counsel
love that.
people when they're talking about public speaking. One of the greatest fears, aside from dying, speaking up in public is the number
Hmm.
one fear, right?
Hmm.
Right.
And we always say, listen, it's not about you. Get out of your own head. What you're saying, you want to think about
Hmm.
how it's important to somebody else. So you immediately get out of your own head and don't worry about it and focus on what you have to say, how it can help somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I don't know if I answered your question
No, you
completely, but
absolutely did because I think in a world where having friends is not what having friends is, and
Hmm.
influence isn't what influence is.
Yeah.
I think it's so like training like this. I think is so important, not just for business owners, but for our teens, right? For the people who are flowing through the system, because let's face it, like if my 15-year-old daughter doesn't have access to this kind of information. I was very lucky, right? I was given the book when I was young, so a lot of those things kind of ingrained in me throughout. But if you have kids
Hmm.
who are just watching social media as is, through the time they're in their 20s and they've developed habits in that ecosystem that are, let's say, average, right? Let's say just the average habits. It's not going to be like it's not getting better. It's going to
Hmm.
continue to kind of be what it is. So I
Right.
think that's something that, more young people, like if you're listening to this and you have young people, even if there's not a training available for them, more young people should be reading this book.
or listening to it. I mean, the audio
Yes.
books are
Yep.
great. There's so many ways to get the information for
Uh-huh.
sure. White papers they can download.
Yeah.
There's free resources out there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I talk about that so much. I do training. We're more than just teaching kicking and punching and self-defense. Martial arts done right should be developing the whole person and improving. I've taught leadership for years. Mark went through my leadership training uh, way back when, and I continue to do it to this day. And one of the things I think is very important is the connection with people, making sure that you know how to connect, and especially when, like Mark was saying, in the digital world now, we forget that the face to face. I mean, we're over Zoom right now. However, we're still trying to make eye contact the best we can, and trying to be engaged. And I think that's such a piece that's missing in this world today, and not just by young people. I see young parents, in their 30s, and they're like disengaged,
Hmm.
and what that's going to do to their kids,
Yeah.
as they're developing,
We're all
so
we're all stuck on these devices.
Yeah.
We
yeah, too much.
Well,
Yeah,
and
too
we
much.
Well, and we've talked about that as it relates to the book before, where you say, like in my heart, right, when I think about win friends and influence people, I really feel like the core of it is making other people feel important, giving people that deep sense of significance, right? And I've found through my life that if I do that, I feel better and they feel better, right? It's just a mutually beneficial experience. But
Mhm.
really, like when our phone's on the table during dinner, right? When we're sitting on the couch in the room with our spouse and they're talking to us, but we're distracted, right?
Hmm.
We are not intentionally, like I don't think people are doing it intentionally, but we have that drop in that feeling of significance because we feel like we're second to the other thing. Or we're even if we're equal to the other thing, we're not above the other thing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I think if people take one thing from Carnegie training, I think if they can take that and say, listen, when I'm at the table and my daughter's telling me about her day, like my phone should be the last thing I'm looking at. Like it should
Right.
be so far out of the screenshot, that they don't know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we're in the classroom, we'll do a whole whiteboard, if you will, of what makes a good leader, right? So we get input from everybody. What makes a good leader? And you just touched upon something that always comes up, somebody who is truly present,
Hmm.
listening, a good listener. And
Hmm.
we always say communication is not just talking, it's listening.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think back to one of my greatest leaders when I worked in radio. She would be so busy, but if I needed her, literally, she'd put everything down and look right at me and give me her full attention. And that was something that meant a lot to me, that I knew
Yeah.
when was in that position, I wanted to be like her.
Right. Yeah. And that's so rare nowadays, and it's,
Oh my gosh, everybody's
unfortunately.
multitasking. They're sending an
Right.
email while they're talking to you.
Right.
You're on a Zoom call and you can see everybody's doing different things. They're
Right.
doing this,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
terrible. Or they just go off camera and you
Yeah.
have no.
Yeah. Who knows what they're doing? Right.
You wonder why people aren't
Mark does it all the time.
connecting.
I do.
I have to
Sometimes I
carry
pretend
this
to be
podcast all
frozen.
the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's just because you're funny.
No, this has been great. I mean, I took a whole page of notes, and I'm starting my second page of notes. And to me, I think that's another thing. Note taking is a lost art. One of the things that I train my people with is it's okay to take notes on your phone or type, and I do that as well. But the best note taking, in my opinion, and I really think this is just how we are built as humans, is by writing it down. And if you want to do a tablet and write it, that's fine too, because I've done it digitally as well, and that works. But now, I mean, you can write your notes and you can capture them and then put them in digitally. I mean, that's what I do now. So
Yeah.
there's really no reason not to do it, but the pen and paper, pencil to paper, is
Mhm.
just that connection to me that really makes me remember it much better.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, we
Yep.
have a whole memory thing, Darren,
Oh,
where
awesome.
the PEG memory system. You want
Okay.
to remember anything? I can teach you how to do that.
That's awesome.
I'm I'm coming to that one. I'm
Yeah.
coming to that one.
It's so
If not for my like reminder system, I would be lost all the time. I can't remember
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So Jody, this, as we wrap up, one of the things that we always do on the podcast, right, is we like to leave people with actionable steps they can take. So this is their podcast of the week they're listening to, and they're like, listen, I want to make my life better based on listening to this podcast. And I think we've given them lots of good stuff today. You know what I mean? But I'm putting you on the spot now. This is like speed round. But if you were going to give people something they can put into action today, right? Aside from, go to your, seminars, right? Something they could put in action today that would really start to move the needle for them, right? What would you say?
You know, you are putting me on the spot, and there's
I
so many
know.
things that come to mind.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I'm
you can
gonna
give more than one.
okay,
Absolutely. Feel free.
okay. So I would recommend downloading. I'll provide a link where they can get the Golden Book, a
Hmm.
down link of that. Okay,
Yep.
because I think the very first thing people should practice is principle number one: don't criticize, condemn, or
Hmm.
complain.
Oh, yeah.
When I tell people that first one, they're like, well, what am I going to talk about all day?
Yeah, right.
It's become ingrained in our
Yeah.
society, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, start there. Try and
Yeah.
go a whole day, then try to go 2 days, then try to go 3 days.
Yeah.
Just on principle number one.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
We do offer free workshops twice a month on Fridays at 10 a.m., and I can give you the link for that. So I encourage you to come to our free Friday workshops. It's virtual, it's 1 hour of your day, twice a month. And, and pick up the book, if you, those are the three things, but
No, this is great.
what? I mean, can I add a fourth?
For sure. Yeah.
No, you can add a bonus.
I can add a bonus.
Bonus.
Go and talk to somebody you work with that you don't know very well and just ask them how their day's going. Get to know them a little bit. We do an exercise in class that we take literally like 1 minute and go ask somebody you haven't met yet in class something interesting about them. There will be people who have worked together for 5, 10 years, and in 1 minute, they find out something about that person that they never knew because they take the time to go ask.
Awesome.
So, I encourage everybody to go and just get to know somebody a little bit deeper.
And don't have your phone in your other hand while you're talking to them.
Exactly. Be fully present, eye contact, smile. Oh, the smile is the other big thing. That's
Smile.
principle 5. Smile.
And that's in the Golden Book.
It's in the Golden Book.
Download the Golden Book. So yes, download the Golden Book. And
Simple
Jody,
thing.
we'll have links in the show notes for everybody for this stuff. But just verbally, for the people who listen to this and don't go to the notes, if people want to find you after the podcast, what's the best way to do that?
Literally just go to Google and type in Dale Carnegie plus Central New York. Because we're a global company in 80 countries, the easiest way to find our local franchise is doing it that way. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Jody Frawley on LinkedIn.
Jody with a Y.
Jody with a Y. Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you.
I know. Awesome.
Yeah, you have to say that.
Got it. All right, Jody.
This has been great. Yes.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. To our listeners, please share this with somebody that you would think would get some benefit from it. Share it with everybody. This was a great podcast. And we will see everyone on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.